This is a short lecture on the difference between massacres and genocide in the context of the ancient world. So the term massacre is used when a group of people is killed indiscriminately. So that might mean in this context of a battle or a war, killing past the point of victory. So even if you've won and everyone agrees you've won, continuing to kill captured soldiers as opposed to taking them as survivors or captives. It can include killing civilians, which are often determined to be women, children, or older community members who are not engaged in combat or are only engaged in defensive protection of their homes. And it can also indicate that whoever is using the word feels the event described was morally unacceptable. So there can be a lot of debate around whether to call something a massacre or not, depending on your perspective. And when you hear someone use this word, you want to pay attention. It might tell you more about that person's perspective than anything objective about the archaeological remains they might be describing. So you just want to ask some follow-up questions, pay attention to the argumentation used to justify the definition of massacre. So if we were in class together, I would show you this 3.5-minute short video about the 5th century CE fort of Öland in Sweden. This is an island off the southern coast of Sweden. You can see in the map in the upper right-hand corner, and I'll link you to this YouTube video. But basically, this is a fort where hundreds of people lived in the 5th century CE. This is the migration period, sort of proto-Viking period, if you like. And the fort was basically attacked, right? This is a stone fort, kind of looks like a castle, but a little bit larger and less grand than European castles we might be familiar with from the continent. And in this Nordic context, you actually find bodies, you can see in this thumbnail, sort of strewn over the doorway, face down in the dirt. They're killed probably in the middle of the night. I mean, they're coming out of their rooms being attacked. And a good indication that this is a massacre comes from the fact that the fort was entirely abandoned after this. So nobody came back and buried the dead. Nobody came and sort of swept them away and reoccupied it. It seems as though the fort had a reputation for being the site of something terrible after this point. So the bodies were buried on site in the rubble and not disturbed for hundreds of years until archaeologists got a hold of this site, and it preserves a kind of forensic look at a single day, terrible day in the life of Sweden in the 5th century CE. Now, the term genocide is distinct from massacre basically on the basis of who is being targeted. So a massacre can describe a killing of any group of people. They could just be in a particular place at a particular time. Genocide is the deliberate killing of a group of people on the basis of their group membership. So you might be targeting a group of people because of their ethnicity, because of their nationality, their racial identity, or their religious identity. And in many cases, this isn't up to individuals in the group to decide. You know, you can sort of imagine scenarios in which someone tries to change their religion or hide their racial identity, and outsiders who are targeting this group still consider them part of the group. It's not up to the group to determine its membership. This is a sort of deliberate seeking out of a group of people that have been determined by a society to be of some negative value. And you'll see other terms used in the mix, so mass murder, mass homicide, right? Because genocide as a term indicates the killing out of a certain group. And I would argue, many historians would argue, that it's not the end result that matters. You don't have to have actually killed everyone who belongs to a particular targeted group for it to be called a genocide. It's simply the desire to eliminate a group on the basis of the membership of that group. The crazy thing about the term genocide is that even though we have a tendency to look at the past and say the past was so violent, but today we're more civilized, most historians would argue that genocide is a feature of the modern world, in fact, the 20th century world. And some of this has to do with the fact that the scale of data collection, the mechanized ability to separate and count people, simply the infrastructure required to move people around in a way that makes genocide possible, all of these things are features of the modern world. So when the term genocide is used in the ancient world, it's often on a much smaller scale, and it can look small in comparison to the genocides we think of today. If you've thought about genocide in your classes before, it's probably been in the context of World War II, the Holocaust. But this count on this slide excludes World War II. Post-World War II, from 1956 to 2016, a good conservative count is that 43 genocides took place, killing at least 50 million people. So not including any of the deaths associated with World War II, we are still talking 50 million people killed for no reason other than their assumed membership in an ethnicity, nationality, racial group, or religious group. And this is an estimate by the U.S. Political Instability Task Force. Genocide has been studied and theorized about because of its unique appearance in the modern world. So this was first done in 1996 by Gregory Stanton as the 8 stages of genocide. This is Gregory Stanton has become the president of Genocide Watch. He's got an institution that sort of tries to anticipate and identify danger zones for these stages. And the idea of these stages is not that they're inevitable, but you can catch genocide at the earlier stages if you know how this tends to progress. So the original 8 stages involved first a classification into us versus them, so some kind of labeling that says we're the in-group, we're the correct group, our nation is this, these are the outsiders, these are the pariahs, these are the people who have glommed onto us. Any kind of division that separates a good guy and a bad guy can be the first stage of genocide. Symbolization comes next, so those groups that are targeted as outsiders get associated with certain symbols, and this is the first step in abstracting those groups. They're not individuals, this isn't someone's father, this is a member of this group, and we can use a symbol to stand in for this. So dehumanization is the next step of abstraction, equating that group with animals or with rats or with termites or with worms, any kind of insect or disease, dehumanizes that group. They're not even human, even if this is just a metaphor and people recognize it as a metaphor. The human brain relies on metaphors in order to make decisions, and so those new labels really stick in a way that is damaging. The next few stages relate to often state-sponsored genocide, but they can involve non-state groups as well. Genocide is always organized. It involves having military force behind it. You have supplementary industries broadcasting and amplifying polarizing propaganda that keeps reinforcing, if you're a member of this group, you have nothing good, you are always this, you are never that, right? Anything that sort of separates and highlights the extremes between the in-group and the out-group. Preparation, extermination, and denial are the last 3 and describe actual identification and separation of those groups, either by ghettoizing them, labeling them, taking away their property, taking away their rights, and eventually killing, but expressing killing through extermination or purification because of those earlier dehumanization stages. Finally, denial is the final stage of every genocide. No one admits to doing mass homicide. You tend to explain it in terms of, again, cleansing your community, denying that you committed any crimes, sometimes actually falsifying records, and so on. In 2013, this stages of genocide chart was amended, and certain of the stages were split apart or sort of elaborated. One was added in. Number 3 and number 8 in the list that you have, 1 through 10, are the quote-unquote new ones, but again, they're just refinements of that original scheme. So discrimination comes before dehumanization, where you're actually using law, custom, and political power to deny rights for certain groups. And then preparation is divided. Number 7 is divided. So perpetrator groups plan action against targeted groups first, and then persecution is the more sort of action stage of preparation. So those are the amendments that were made in 2013, and you have that full handout in the materials for this course. So this is my sort of summary or annotated version of Stanton's work. If you don't have access to my course materials, you can actually Google Gregory Stanton or 10 Stages of Genocide and get this material in detailed form with a lot of examples. I'll walk you through those stages. If you're in the course, I also added in student answers from discussions we had in fall 2019 about examples that students in my class knew about for either lead up to genocide, some of these earlier stages, or genocides they had heard about. So if you're having trouble sort of coming up with ideas about what does this refer to, what does it not refer to, this might help. So these range from really seemingly innocuous distinctions, so examples of classification that could be just dividing jocks and nerds in a high school, but that's a kind of classification and abstraction that removes humanity from a group. And that can go, move down the road to like use of stereotyping words like libtards in political discourse today, to action examples like race-based violent refugee and containment camps near the border, and into full-blown genocide that America has either played a role in or we've been exposed to through our understanding of history and popular movies like Hotel Rwanda, Schindler's List, Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and so on. So I hope that's helpful to contextualize these concepts, and I hope you enjoy the case studies. Well, enjoy. I hope you get something out of the case studies for this lesson on massacre and genocide in the ancient world.